Bring in show music, please.
Hi, I'm CNBC producer Katie Kramer. Here's what's coming up today on Squawk Pod. What do America's corporate leaders think of the first weeks of Trump 2.0? The Yale management professor called a CEO whisperer, Jeffrey Sonnenfeld, says the corner office is concerned.
We had 100 CEOs across sectors, 60% Republican group, about 30% Democrat, 10% independent, and they were overwhelmingly discouraged.
And may not have the stomach for more market volatility off the president's policies. A 10% loss already.
CEOs are doing it, but they aren't doing it with grandiosity and trying to throw stones at the emperor that miss.
And tariff talk.
Who should be allowed to tariff us if we can't?
The levies threatened on products from around the globe and from the wine cellar to the toy box.
Do you think it's LOL or LOL?
LOL.
LOL.
All that today and more. It's Friday, March 14th, 2025. Squawk Pod begins right now.
Stand Becky by in 3, 2, 1. Cue it, please.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Squawk Box right here on CNBC. We're live from the NASDAQ market site in Times Square. I'm Becky Quick, along with Joe Kernen and Andrew Ross Sorkin. Not only is it Friday, guys, it's Pi Day.
It is Pi Day, that's right.
3.1415926 8797.
Oh, this is such a... You practiced.
No, we're learning it last night
You are?
for Kyle. 323.
Yeah.
And see how many they have a race today, so we'll see how far they can carry it out.
Other than being able to do that, do you get any advantage from knowing how many, all those decimal places?
No.
None whatsoever.
No. I tried to carry it out to 30 and I can't.
Get yourself a calculator.
Pi Day for me just sounds
Apple.
like, no, pizza. But I mean, as an excuse for that maybe. But it is kind of, it's a cool day. And total nerds and geeks, really, it's like almost
guilty.
Yeah.
Here we are.
It's between my anniversary and my son's birthday. So
right, it's the
13,
border
14,
day between
15, yes.
Anniversary, Pi Day, Scotty's birthday.
Yeah, exactly.
And the equity futures are looking up. Maybe not as a result of that, but maybe.
Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer indicating he's now going to vote to advance a 6-month bill to fund the government that was passed by GOP lawmakers in the House. That happened earlier this week. It means the bill will likely eventually pass in the Senate today or possibly tonight. A key Senate test vote now set to begin. That's going to happen after 2 p.m. Eastern. And we will need, I say we, it will need, I shouldn't say we, I didn't mean it like that. It's going to need at least 8 Democrats to support it. Schumer speaking on the Senate floor yesterday. Here's what he said.
Under a shutdown, the Trump administration would have full authority to deem whole agencies, programs, and personnel non-essential, furloughing staff with no promise they would ever be rehired.
And if this afternoon's Senate test vote passes, then lawmakers would then have to agree on timing for when a final vote will be held. It's possible the government could shut down before that final vote is taken.
Yeah. We as a country are going to need those.
That's what I meant. We as
because
a group,
I wasn't thinking
we
about
as politicians.
We as Republicans are going to need 8 more votes. We as Democrats are going to need 8 more votes as Democrats did. So we are we. And you know what? I think we forget that. I think we forget that way. Why are you laughing? I think we forget that way too much, don't we?
It's an interesting about face for Schumer, but you probably look through
I think
chess game on this and realize there's
his body language.
There's not going to be a whole lot they get out of this. The caucus was split. At least half of his caucus did not want him to shut the government.
But even when he was acting like he was, he always seemed like he was.
It's a bad scenario for
it is, but he seemed like he knew. I'll tell you that people are saying, and I hear it, on Twitter, that if you control all 3 branches of government, and the government shuts down, you could still blame, the Republicans. But I don't think that was going to happen this time because of this. The House is recessed. They passed the Republican, and so I don't.
I also think what Schumer pointed out is accurate. For the Democrats to say that they want to slow DOGE and want to make sure this has been done in a little different way, that was not going to get them to their ultimate goal on that.
Right. Oh, boy. Federal, don't you love when people say, don't talk with businesses, just talk about stocks? We're so wrapped up in everything in Washington, right? Not one thing happens that we talk about that isn't somehow, it seems like, tied to.
It feels like it's been
right
that way
now.
for about 15 years.
I know, but the last, has it been 2 months yet? The last January 20th?
No, it hasn't. It's
Incredible.
a few more days. In the meantime, the Premier of Canada's province of Ontario calling a meeting on tariffs yesterday with Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick productive and saying that the two men will speak again next week. Earlier this week, Ontario leader Doug Ford suspended an electricity surcharge that Ontario had levied against 3 U.S. states. And President Trump pulling back on threats to double tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum, although a 25% U.S. tariff did go into effect on Wednesday.
I'll be glad to get to April 2nd. I will, because...
See what happens?
Yeah, I think a lot of this is total BS.
Well, here's the thing.
Which part?
I don't think right now, honestly, I think if cooler heads prevail, if you're in compliance with USMCA, that should all be off the table.
Right.
All right?
Agree.
The fentanyl thing, all right, I get it. You used it for a while. Let's get to the point where you stop saying that. If you're going to arbitrarily
Look at you.
No, if you're going to put arbitrary, I've always said, I've said that all along. But if you're going to arbitrarily put tariffs on a lot of stuff that our car makers use from Canada, and if you can see, just connect the dots, it's going to cost our guys, our automakers, billions of dollars to comply with this for no good. What's the reason? So the billions of dollars they would have spent on retrofitting or just take your pick, new factories, whatever they do with money, if it's $2 or $3 billion less because of this, it makes no sense. And you know who pay it? We do pay it. We do, not all of it.
U.S. consumers will
right, we do, not all of it.
Yeah.
But and I think
You're coming around.
I'm not coming around.
You're coming around.
Not coming around.
Coming
I just
around.
think that if I see why, Sonnenfeld's coming on. He'll be hyperbolic, I know. But if Joe Kernen, the CEO of Joe Kernen Inc., behind the scenes, I'm saying these things, just like these other CEOs are saying.
Yesterday,
but cooler heads might prevail.
Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, and Howard Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary, both said yesterday in interviews that they would like to see, their plan is to eventually not have these tariffs come on. I think if you talk to Peter Navarro, he'll tell you something very different. Peter Navarro has always told us that this is going to be a long-term way of raising revenue. Now, those two competing camps are both in this administration, and you wonder which one wins out.
There's one camp, there's only one camp, an audience of one.
Right.
And that audience of one, you can go back 30 years ago. It's been talking about tariffs, raising money. He believes.
How about reciprocal?
This is not a, to me.
But he didn't follow through with it in his first administration.
Sure, but I think that this is a lifetime goal.
But he followed through with some that were kept on by the Biden administration.
It's a lifetime goal. So the idea that he's going to be swayed by,
not for the sake
either
of
Bessent or Lutnick, I'm not so
but
sure.
Maybe swayed by the market's reaction. Maybe swayed by what he hears from auto.
I don't think he has a lifetime goal of levying tariffs on people.
I think he's
slapping. I think he thinks it'll bring back.
He has a theory of the case. But I'm saying it's a theory. People who have theories of the case for decades. Typically want to at least try to experiment with the theory.
Don't you think reciprocal tariffs might make sense in certain cases?
In certain cases, but
although
I would say in limited
tariffs
cases.
that we've heard from Canada.
Who should be allowed to tariff us if we can't?
But some of them have been red herrings too. I mean, if you listen to
but the ones that are.
But the idea that we're going to charge 200 and something percent, that Canada is going to charge that on our dairy. It's only if we reach levels that are more than twice of what we're bringing in now. So they've never been hit.
That's the USMC.
Yeah. So they've never been hit. So. These theoretical tariffs that aren't actually playing out because we don't hit the thresholds on them, I think is.
But you could handle that if you want to renegotiate the USMCA, then that takes all this off the table.
Right.
Become a 51st state, takes all that off the table.
By the way, my new view for you is to say go for it. You go get Canada to be your 51st state.
I don't want it.
Because it will.
It would immediately supplant Vermont as the most liberal state. I don't want it.
But it would undo the politics of this entire country.
It would.
That you, I think, would be so valuable.
You're right.
So I find the whole thing.
Just like they tried to do with the open border with the undocumented Democrats. It would make us permanently It would make us permanently.
Have you talked to the folks?
They're not returning my calls. What have I done? I've done nothing. Have I?
U.S. real estate giant Compass is in advanced talks to buy Berkshire Hathaway's brokerage business. That's according to a report in the Wall Street Journal that says a deal could be finalized soon, barring any last-minute hurdles. That deal would be a rarity for Berkshire and CEO Warren Buffett, who rarely sells companies to others. The Journal cites statistics showing Compass was the largest U.S. brokerage by volume in 2023, while Berkshire's Home Services of America came in at the fourth largest. I believe that unit's been basically break even for a while, but there was a big court case last year that Berkshire Hathaway was added to the list of defendants, and this was that court case in Kansas City, Missouri, where they accused the National Association of Realtors and a lot of these brokerages of artificially inflating prices for the fees that home sellers pay, the agent fees that are usually between 5% and 6%. There was a big ruling that came out. It was something like $1.75 billion or something. Berkshire has the deepest pockets of any of those brokerages that were brought up because they've got so much cash on hand, more than any other company. In fact, I read a statistic last week that Berkshire Hathaway now has more money than the value of all the companies in the FTSE 100, just in the terms of the cash that they have on hand. So that might be part of the reasoning, too. Because he thinks that he's a target of this? Well, he doesn't think it. They were added as a list of defendants.
No, I know, but is the idea that somehow that they would be? I mean, they're a bigger target because they're the biggest one. But
right, they've got more money than any of the other brokerages.
And so if you get rid of it, the idea is that Compass is going to have to deal with this problem, and that they have.
A lot of them settled. I believe Berkshire Hathaway did not settle in that suit because Berkshire Hathaway never settles lawsuits that they think are brought frivolously. But it's interesting. We'll see what happens with it.
Toy maker MGA Entertainment, which makes Bratz and LOL surprise dolls. You think it's LOL or LOL?
LOL.
LOL.
It is LOL surprise. Yeah.
But LOL dolls would rhyme. LOL dolls. You've heard of it?
Yeah.
You've heard of LOL dolls?
Yeah.
You?
They're very popular with little girls.
I've heard of Bratz.
I don't know.
Accelerating its shift out of China, the company is. It's a major supplier of toys to Walmart and Target. It now says it's taking steps to move 40% of its manufacturing to India, Vietnam, and Indonesia within 6 months or so. After the shift, roughly 60% of the company's manufacturing will still be in China. The CEO warned that he may have to raise wholesale prices on the goods made in China to protect the company's already thin profit margins. President Trump has imposed a 10% tariff on all Chinese imports in early February, on top of existing duties, and doubled that to 20% earlier this month. Does that help? It's not coming here.
Well, I was going to say the move is to try and get manufacturing back here.
Right.
But it's also to punish China, and it's then you throw fentanyl into the discussion about China.
You're saying this is good or bad?
I'm saying that you don't need fentanyl. You can throw it in there, but we got a lot of other issues with China to try to maybe punish them for doing things.
But the cost of these dolls is still going to go up.
Right. And the manufacturer's not coming here. We're just moving.
It's not coming, right.
But is that is that something that
Steve Mnuchin yesterday in another interview theorized that if you were just to put a 10% tariff on everything from everywhere, that would be something that really would shore up the budget here, that would bring in money, and it would keep them from going to other countries instead of coming here for manufacturing. So
that's interesting, yeah.
Cheese will be next.
Coming up on Squawk Pod, the corner office and the Oval Office this week saw multiple gatherings of CEOs, and the top issue, their relationship with the White House. Yale's Jeffrey Sonnenfeld, who hosted one of those CEO summits, joins us next.
I've known Trump for almost 30 years. He's a very smart guy. He doesn't want to be put in a corner. He gets defensive like a wounded animal and slashes at you if you embarrass him. And they've learned how to try to engage him through small groups of collective action.
This is Squawk Pod.
Up and Andrew, Q.
You're watching Squawk Box right here on CNBC. I'm Andrew Sorkin, along with Joe Kernen and Becky Quick.
Goldman Sachs CEO David Solomon out with his annual letter Leslie Picker joins us right now. She's got more on that letter. Good morning, Leslie.
Hey, Becky, good morning. Yeah, he's calling the current environment, quote, complex and saying that clients are acting cautiously until they have more clarity on policy. He said, quote, global growth has been hampered by inflation and escalation in potential tariffs and the toll of geographical tensions and prolonged conflicts across multiple regions. Solomon described the direction of various policy items in the U.S. to be, quote, unclear, noting the, quote, discussion around tariffs in particular may weigh on corporate sentiment and the impact on the bottom lines could be significant. He said, quote, many CEOs I engage with are evaluating the potential impact on their top and bottom lines. And as a result, we are seeing some of our corporate clients act more cautiously until they have more clarity. However, he says that there has also been a meaningful shift in CEO sentiment, given the expected change in the regulatory environment. He writes, quote, the appetite for deal making has increased, and that could spur further capital markets activity in 2025. Shares of Goldman down more than 8% this year, in part on concerns that this recent bout of uncertainty that he describes could hamper the potential revival in deals and loan making. So he sees some positives there on the regulatory front as it pertains to the capital markets, but also the uncertainty, which is impacting some clients in the near term.
Leslie, I want to thank you for that. I want to bring in another voice about the relationship between confidence, the White House, corporate America, all of it. Joining us right now is Yale School of Management Senior Associate Dean for Leadership Studies, Jeff Sonnenfeld, is also a CNBC contributor. Jeff, it's nice to see you, sir.
Good to see you, Andrew. Thanks.
So let's just talk about it. There seems to be a disconnect between the idea of confidence. I mean, and maybe there's no disconnect. I think right now there's not a lot of confidence. Is that fair to say?
I think that is fair to say. I think that report you just had on David Solomon was fascinating because he's shifted down a bit just from what he was saying a day ago, where he was a little bit more effervescent. He's still talking about deal activity, but we don't see it. And we're at a 12-year low in M&A activity. I have David Solomon in class in 2 weeks, and we'll see how he's feeling at that point. But he's acknowledging the uncertainty. And that's what we're seeing with the CEO community. It's not just the reports you had this morning on the plunge in retail sentiment, the plunge in consumer sentiment, and CEO confidence indices by other indices, such as Chief Executive Magazine. But we had 100 CEOs across sectors, 60% Republican group, about 30% Democrat, 10% Independent, and they were overwhelmingly discouraged. There's a lot of goodwill that had been accumulated after the election, even though most large CEOs didn't support him, President Trump. They did rally, and we encouraged that patriotically to go down to Mar-a-Lago, talk about company-specific issues. Same thing happened in 2017. That goodwill dissipates quickly, and it's happening right now. The 85% think these tariff moves are a disaster, even though they're in favor of tariffs. They want selective tariffs. So
here's the question, though. If they were to come out, I mean, the Trump administration would come out with tariffs, we know what the deal is, one way or the other, on April 2nd. I don't know if you believe that that's even plausible, but that's what they say is going to happen. Will that create the certainty with which business can then know what the deal is going forward and therefore maybe be able to make investments in other things? Or do you see the tariffs as a negotiating tool that can come on, come off, will always be sort of up for grabs, in which case, obviously, the uncertainty persists?
As you guys said just this morning at the start of the show, I think you nailed it by saying that Howard Lutnick's statements about these tariffs having a transitory effect as the Secretary of Commerce, Howard Lutnick, as opposed to Peter Navarro, who I actually introduced to Donald Trump for the first time, is that Peter Navarro...
You're responsible for the relationship?
Yeah, I kept giving his books to Donald Trump that he didn't read, but Jared Kushner saw them there, and then that's unfortunately the path we took. I've known Peter for years, but Peter is saying these are a permanent way of life and a revenue source. During our session, it was really fascinating. It was... as Eamon was giving us updates, Eamon Javers from CNBC, he gave us 12 updates to the course of the day, and people gasped each time because they were head-spinning reversals. So whether or not it was automotive to advertising or consulting to computers, as people saying, well, how do we keep up with this to make massive moves in automotive and manufacturing of tens of billions of dollars of capital? We can't even have consistency within 10 minutes. These were head-spinning reversals, and that was quite stunning. So CEOs are worried about that uncertainty more than anything else, and that's we have roughly half of them said we're ready now at a tipping point to talk about a disastrous economic situation. Most of the analysts you have on here in the last week would tell you that they have expectations about the recession have shot up to almost as high as 30 to 40%, depending which one you've had on. These people, to our amazement, were quite a bit higher. They're saying 92, 94%. We're saying we're headed right now on this path towards a recession.
All this, Jeff, is tariff related. And most CEOs, if you ask why they were optimistic initially, it wasn't because of tariffs. It's because of deregulation. It's because of keeping corporate tax rates at 21% and other tax cuts. And it's because of DOGE and cutting down government spending. Now, it's all been muddled, and we had Scott Besson on last week. And we said the seat-of-the-pants nature of the way this tariff story is playing out might be bad for consumers.
There's no put that the Trump call on the upside is if we have good policies, then the markets will go up.
But in general, the other three things I mentioned versus what Kamala Harris proposed to do, I still take issue with your blanket statement that the people you talked to invariably didn't support Trump, because those three things, deregulation, keeping corporate taxes low, and DOGE, are all very positive. Maybe this, we had Brad on yesterday, altimeter capital Gerstner.
Yep, Brad Gerstner, yeah.
He says, look, whether the market needed to come down, whether 20% is the max that it comes down. I mean, it's 150% tariff in India. There are certain tariffs that need to be addressed, and reciprocal tariffs. But once we get beyond this, you're left with less regulation, less government spending, bond yields coming down, which is good. And what was the last thing I said? And lower taxes for corporations.
I wouldn't minimize.
Is positive.
I wouldn't minimize.
I'll take Trump any day over what we would have had.
I wouldn't minimize
with Kamala Harris. Would you? Do you wish Kamala Harris was president?
We wouldn't have this volatility. Do you realize
you wish Kamala Harris was president?
We have just lost in the market, Joe, about
10% on the S&P.
12 to 15% on NASDAQ.
Happens almost
we're
every
in NASDAQ
year.
right now, so that's NASDAQ. Say 12%. Do you realize
happens
that
every
you
year,
could, with the amount of money? No. It's happened in 97.
Every other year.
It's happened 6 or 7 times, and there are catastrophic reasons with catastrophic consequences. I heard
Jeff,
when
10% on the S&P
Secretary
is not catastrophic.
Scott Besson said, no, do you know what that 10% is? Of that 10% that was just lost, you could fund the NIH for 90 years. Okay. You could fund the Ukraine war for 90 years. That's a lot of money. So you're looking at $40 billion a year.
Jeff, you don't want to
that.
argue that 10% is some kind of historic sell-off. So don't even go there. By translating it into billions of dollars.
The crash in 1929 on October 29th. You know how much that was? It was 10%. In
1987, it was 22.6% in one day.
That was. It also took 4 years for that to ever recover that price too.
Jeff, you don't want to be on the side saying 10% is catastrophic.
Just to finish this point, Joe, it is consequences for that. That's an awful lot of money. You know how much that is for the average 401k holder? That's over $20,000 just lost for every family's 401k. That might be inconsequential to you, but that $40,000 per family was a lot that was just squandered. And it didn't need to happen. But on deregulation, yes, if you have your financiers on here, Jamie Dimon would be supportive of it. Guess who's not getting deregulation? The guest you had on yesterday. In M&A, why is M&A down by a 12-year low? It's because they're afraid of the right now.
Brad
There's nothing.
Said yesterday when Trump came in, all the investment bankers were called back from the beach to start working on deals.
Every company has pulled their M&A teams off the beach. They haven't done anything for 3 years, and they're all back to work.
Do you think deals get done in 2 months? It hasn't even been 2 months yet.
Yeah, well, there's no deal activity right now, and the reason is this FTC commissioner, the chairman, who is a very experienced guy, a very smart guy, can't disavow a single thing that Lina Khan stood for.
President Trump appointed me to protect Americans in the marketplace, and that includes from big tech. And I've said since day one, big tech is one of our main priorities, and that remains true.
You name it, whether or not it's Google, Amazon, he's in favor of it. Ladies' handbags on Tapestry, he thought those were their priorities. If you were to ask him, as Eamon did yesterday on your show, Eamon asked him, how about PBMs, which is 40% of the drug costs? He said to you on the show, I don't care about that. We asked him about refineries, where they've had 300% price increases. You want to know where the price gouging was? That's where it was. He didn't care about that. He cared about big tech companies, the same thing as Lina Khan. He didn't care about baked bread. There are 3 companies control over 70% of our baked bread, and they have huge price increases there. He didn't care about that. He cares to focus on where Lina Khan went, and there's zero daylight between him and Lina Khan. So, yeah, I don't see a difference there. And if you look at deregulation, Joe, I don't see where it is. You know, most of the automotive companies and the extractive energy companies, the oil companies, they want to keep the same methane abatement and pollution control that was there, and they fought the last Trump administration to maintain the Clean Air Act.
Hey Jeff, we've had some strategists who have come on the show and said that in the last Trump administration, it was all of the good things for business that came first: lower taxes, deregulation, those things. It was the tariff talks that came later in the administration, and that's when the market really did start to wobble and drop pretty significantly on some of those things. We've had them say that this time we're going to take the bad medicine up front and maybe get to some of the better things for business later in the term. If that happens, do you think these Wall Street CEOs, or these CEOs in general, will change their mind about things?
The sequencing, you're exactly right. While going back to a century, the GOP candidate was supported by over half of major business leaders consistently until 2016. It went to 0. And then 2020, it went to 2, and until Elon Musk joined this summer, it was 0 again of the major business leaders. However, they did get a lot of support, say in 2017, January 2017, even though they didn't support Trump in the campaign, they rallied around patriotically, and it's a good thing they did. And he had that support because it was business issues he addressed early on, Becky. You're right, as they formed these business advisory councils. It all dissipated by August. In that case, they all quit. It was the first time in American history we've had the U.S. business community refuse the commander-in-chief's call to action. They left and they never came back till now, as in August of 2017, post-Charlottesville. And that was because he started getting more and more into these social issues. The tariff tantrums right now are a significant issue. We're attacking our allies. In some cases, it makes sense. Obviously, the 1,000% surge in steel coming in through China, they're not making that steel. That's coming in from not just China, probably also from Russia, as we've charted some of it, and I think even some of it from Ukraine. But it's coming in from Canada, and Trump is right to have selective tariffs on that. Obviously, there are automotive parts and other things coming through Canada. CEOs support that, but they should have been selective. This whipsawing and talking about 200% and all this and that. We had the premier of Ontario with us. The CEOs from automotive and others were shocked and horrified. We also had 60 mayors of major cities with us, and mayors from Michigan and Minnesota were horrified to hear Premier Ford of Ontario talk about retaliating by cutting off electricity. Why are we going down this path with allies so that they're booing the national anthem in Canada? So these trade tantrums have come on very early on, Becky, you're right, and that wasn't what we saw. Many people keep saying Trump 2.0 is going to be better than Trump 1.0 because of the lessons of experience. It depends, how good a learner you are. We don't have the same group with the same guardrails, but we don't have the same experienced hands. The ideologues around him are more sycophantic. And what's interesting is how the CEOs are reaching Trump. They have learned. They've learned that it has to be through collective action for the most part. They see the kind of Zelensky scene we saw before, where Zelensky, not to vilify the victim, but he's a thin-skinned person himself, and his short temper wouldn't work for a CEO either. So the kind of blow-up we saw in the Oval Office, no CEO wants. But we saw, not at the Business Roundtable meeting, where they're sitting in rows and columns like in a church basement, silent, listening to President Trump speak. At our event, just hours before, we had the same people in active free-for-all, but President Trump wasn't in the room. But the day before that, the Tech Council met with him, select a small group of people, just between us. Michael Dell, separately, Arvind Krishna from IBM. They had fantastic one-on-one or very small group discussions. I've known Trump for almost 30 years. He's a very smart guy. He doesn't want to be put in a corner. He gets defensive like a wounded animal and slashes at you if you embarrass him. And they've learned how to try to engage him through small groups of collective action. He doesn't like NAFTA. He doesn't like NATO. He doesn't like the Business Roundtable. He doesn't like collective action. And that's how you take down a forceful personality like him. But he will listen to reason if they talk to him strategically. And that's what we see. The lessons of Trump 2.0 are how the business community seems to have learned it. You know, I'm hearing from Joe's friends on the left hounding me all the time. Why aren't your CEO friends speaking out? They are. They're speaking out differently and better. I want to know where these CEOs who are not the multi-billion-dollar oligarchs, they're hired hands working for shareholders. Where's the stakeholder democracy we used to hear about? The 1960s, the social change we saw, there was a triumph of clergy, interfaith clergy linking arms together, and trade union leaders and campus voices. They're all silent. They want the CEOs to do all the heavy lifting for them. Well, the CEOs are doing it, but they aren't doing it with grandiosity and trying to throw stones at the emperor that miss.
Okay. Jeff, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
We'll be right back. That's the pod for today and for the week. Thank goodness it's Friday. It's been a long one. Squawk Box is hosted by Joe Kernen, Becky Quick, and Andrew Ross Sorkin. Tune in weekday mornings on CNBC at 6 Eastern. Get the best of our TV show right into your ears. Listen anytime you want when you follow Squawk Pod wherever you get your podcasts. We'll meet you right back here on Monday. Have a great weekend.
We are clear. Thanks, guys.